meaning both the receiver can request the stream and the sender as well. Establish a link. Yes, establishing a link means you'll need to open ports, forward ports, or assign an IP.
Knock on the door from one side or the other. It's always a big hassle, especially if the other side isn't a professional team and so on.
Yes, and often you're the professional team, but the other side isn't. In that case, you can initiate the connection from opposite side, and it's easier that way. And then there's the political aspect, which we often discuss. The fact that SRT was made an open and free protocol and the source code was released. That played a dramatic role in its popularity. If you imagine, say, 2018 or 2019, not much time had passed since the protocol was made open. Those were the pre-COVID years, but still, during that time, many manufacturers of various equipment in our industry, cameras, playout systems, and so on, were already thinking about how to implement professional video transmission over the public internet. It was really a hot topic at the time. So what were the options? Going with RTMP? That's outdated. You can't transmit a good bitrate with it. Audio pairs are limited, and there are lots of other nuances. The second option is to write your own protocol, but then you fall into the trap of it being your own protocol, incompatible with anything else. A third option to remember, back then there was a protocol starting with the letter Z which required payment, and again, limited compatibility was also an issue. But now you have this, a newly open-sourced protocol has appeared on the market, which had been tested for many years in a closed infrastructure, in a closed environment. And it comes with ready-to-use code with an API that's clear to all developers, and is very easy to implement with minimal effort. Just take it, integrate it, and use it. For example, for transmit or receive, or both. And it was precisely this that allowed the protocol to be quickly adopted across a huge number of solutions in the market.
Well, I see. I guess in a way that also answers the question of why the manufacturer needed this. Because usually it's the opposite. When someone creates something good, the first instinct is to lock it down, set up a licensing policy, sit back, collect royalties, and wait for it to become the de facto global standard, and everything will work out well for the manufacturer.
Well, probably, but you'll also face some resistance. You really have two options. Either you create a closed solution, a closed infrastructure based on your own hardware or software, or you go the other way. Open it up, make something accessible to everyone, but then you risk all your competitors jumping in and using it too. In my opinion, it was a brilliant management decision. The people who were responsible for the development of the protocol, after 5 years of it being proprietary, following the first approach, made the decision that it was time to open it up. And from what I gathered in the discussions I had, they were guided by the idea that the industry had reached a point where it was ready to expand significantly, but it lacked that binding glue in the form of a publicly available protocol. Then comes the commercial calculation. If a niche grows rapidly, it pulls along the solutions that are present within that niche. And accordingly, the solutions drive the growth of the companies that came up with the concept, which in fact is exactly what we saw happen in 2024. It's kind of obvious now.
A sort of a traditional question from people, from senior adult men responsible for extremely important events, when they say, please, just make sure we have guaranteed communication lines because we're dealing with events that can't be repeated, like the Olympics or other very major public, political, or any other kind of extremely significant events. Usually for such events, they use absolutely only dedicated communication lines. It doesn't matter whether it's just a video link or a standard P2P IP connection or anything else. I've heard, and I know from personal experience, since I've been involved in organizing the Olympic Games more than once, that nowadays not only are non-guaranteed environments being used more and more often, but also mobile networks. And very often SRT protocol is used. Essentially, it is among the most commonly used ones. Probably among the most frequently used protocols in such highly critical events. What made this protocol become so popular?
Well, yes, I understand very well what you're talking about. This conservatism in television is quite healthy and justified because reliability comes first. In a way, it always holds back the adoption of new technologies. SRT is no exception. I think that any transmission technology can have issues one way or another. Satellites can go out of alignment, and we also sometimes have problems with terrestrial channels.
Excavator issues.
Yes, exactly. And the main question here is how you can respond, what options you have to switch to a backup, and how long that takes. And in the case of SRT, From the moment it appeared, you always had the option to bring in multiple internet providers to a location if you don't trust just one. And at all professional venues, TV centers, studios, stadiums, that's actually already implemented in most cases, I think. And then you can simply send out multiple parallel SRT streams from the location. There's a fixed delay and the ability to switch over on the receiving end. Yes, you'll lose a certain number of frames, but that option has always been available. And now I think there's been a real breakthrough. A major one, because a few years ago, SRT added a feature called pass redundancy, and that allows seamless switching. Absolutely seamless. And without any loss. It's completely unnoticeable on the receiving end, whatever is happening behind the scenes. You send the same packets from the transmitting device through multiple routes. 2, 3, as many providers as you have. And on the receiving end, it dynamically switches packet by packet, taking the first packet that arrives through any of the channels. So as long as you have at least one link still working on both ends, it will continue to operate seamlessly, delivering the data. And this elevates SRT reliability, I would even say, at the level above other technologies in many implementations. And of course, we can't forget that cost is something everyone considers. Technical directors think about reliability, while other directors think,
well, yes, the other directors, they tell them, you better just carry it over by hand. That happens too, yes.
Well, at the Olympics, yes, and in all those games, it's a very strong development.
Well, I've encountered it too, because even at the site, at the last Olympics in France, there was SRT equipment installed that was reliably transmitting the broadcast signal. And it wasn't a signal from some unilateral broadcaster. It was an international signal. And I spent quite a bit of time there. I was quite surprised by that, but nevertheless, that's how it really was. Before we wrap up, probably a question just out of curiosity. What interesting cases have happened with SRT in general? I'll probably share mine later as well. From your experience, what interesting things have happened during the implementation of SRT protocols and so on?
Well, in general, of course, when introducing new technologies, especially in an industry where this issue is really felt, because there are specialists who are purely IP and others who are purely video, and SRT sits right in the middle, so you need to know both. There are all sorts of different stories. Well, just recently, the first thing that comes to mind is a client who needed to set up a delay, something like a minute or two, I don't remember exactly, for obvious reasons, during a broadcast. And the specialized equipment, of course.
Like a reverse delay, right?
Yeah, they didn't have that until then. So here's how they managed it. They set up multiple SRT links back and forth. Each one had like about 8 seconds of delay, and they stacked them to get the required delay. They just bounced the signal back and forth, created a bunch of routes, and that's how they elegantly solved it using SRT. Although, of course,
that's not what it was designed for, but still, all the packets were literally counted correctly and restored properly.
Yeah, it was interesting that many routes worked absolutely fine and didn't cause any issues.
Well, and I'd probably mention one more extremely beneficial and advantageous feature of SRT that I personally know. It works very well even without a server in the middle. Yes, that's probably really important, and it's worth emphasizing. To initiate a connection, it's not necessary to have a server somewhere that's controlled by someone else.
Yes, that's an absolutely crucial aspect right now, given the current global situation. Indeed, SRT is truly point-to-point. That is, the link goes directly between two devices, probably your own devices, and there are no intermediate servers that, for some reason, might fail to operate.
Block the signal, intercept it, interfere with it in some way, and so on, because that's really relevant in today's reality. I remember when everyone was so excited about cloud services being the ultimate solution, and we all, including those in broadcasting, rushed into the cloud. Recent events have shown that if you don't own that cloud, various things can happen, outcomes from that move, both in terms of cost effectiveness and, frankly speaking, cost effectiveness dropping to zero when you end up getting absolutely nothing. This, I'll say it again, is important under current conditions. And I'd like to ask one more question, probably going back to what I started with, why I mentioned both the pandemic and recent events. Now, transmission over the internet is becoming practically the de facto standard and has become the norm, including for live events and everything else. To what extent, in your view, or generally speaking, Has the world felt the growth and development of the SRT protocol itself? At the onset of the pandemic, when everyone switched to remote work, remote production, and so on, how much has it grown in numbers, perhaps? That would be interesting.
Let's put it this way. During the pandemic, we conducted annual reports on the broadcast industry. These are surveys of professionals who report various operational parameters. Among other things, the survey includes questions about protocols. SRT, in fact, finally surpassed RTMP in percentage terms after the pandemic, which essentially, and funny, we were competing against from the very beginning. That's one. And two, there were a huge number of really cool, unconventional use cases because people were stuck at home and had to come up with different setups where you could bring in a guest, the interior, everything from people's homes, and route it all into the studio and back. And SRT, of course, very sharply started to grow. One of the coolest cases I remember was remote color grading for film. The colorist was sitting, say, in Kazakhstan, and the producer was somewhere in the States. They had to work together, but flying was not an option. They set up an SRT link with a 1-second delay, calmly did the color grading with 10-bit 4.2.2 signal transmission, and it worked.
Yeah, as they say, there wouldn't have been happiness if misfortune hadn't helped. And one more short question, probably. I'm personally curious now, how suitable is SRT not only for transmitting video information, but also for transmitting some kind of control data? Because we all know, I just witnessed it myself. I was recently at the organization of a sailing race where everything is done entirely in remote production. Is it possible to transmit some additional information in this SRT package, like camera control, management, tally signals, and so on?
During the process of development, the goal was to create a protocol that would be clear and easy to implement for all market participants. And turning it into some kind of all-in-one tool that includes this, that, the fifth, the 10th, like intercom, return video, would only make it overly complicated. And for part of the market, it would become simply unusable. That's why we still believe that SRT is, first and foremost, meant to transmit.
To do your task.
Yes, to deliver video, audio, and metadata from point A to point B, where you can transmit certain things. But it's still not a bidirectional solution, with no additional services. There are other protocols for that. SRT is not a universal all-in-one tool that does everything, but it is supported by an insane number of solutions on the market.
Right now, there's a lot of talk about implementing the 21.10 standard and similar IP-based connections. There's always a compatibility issue. Always. No matter what anyone says, even though everything is described in the standard, there's always a case where equipment from one vendor doesn't work with equipment from another vendor, and so on and so forth. Have you encountered such issues, and does using SRT actually help? And are there cases when it gets difficult here because of different implementations by vendors?
That's a good question, really. Unlike ST2110, SRT is not a standard in the sense of being just a documented specification. It's actual working code. You go to GitHub, grab a release of the code, and in this sense, compatibility becomes much easier because everyone is using the same code, unless for some reason you decide to change it. So the compatibility issue really only comes down to the fact that everyone might be using different versions. Someone may have made SRT 3 years ago and forgotten about it, left it. Meanwhile, a new, latest version was released just last week, and some people do update. But here, everything works like in mobile communications. When you connect two devices with different versions, the lower version is used. Accordingly, the available functionality will be limited.
To that of the lower version, there's backward compatibility too.
Absolutely. It's guaranteed. Thanks to this, it's possible to work with all kinds of software, freemium or low-cost solutions. Integration with professional solutions based on SRT. It doesn't matter which version is older, it will be applied, and you'll get the functionality defined in that older version.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, today we had Alexandre Gritsouk with us, and we talked about the SRT protocol. And basically, we also briefly touched on the broader topic of remote protocols, video transmission over public networks, and so on and so forth. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to clarify something we mentioned, or if there are any concerns, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. We are here to help. Any suggestions, comments, or if you'd like to share your own experience, please don't hesitate to reach out. There will be a link below the video right here where you can click and leave your feedback. Thank you very much, Alexander.
Thank you, Oleg. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.